Bringing a building project to life is about adjusting the dials of development. And what I mean by that is these different aspects that you can control and sort of dial up or down depending on your situation. And more importantly, the way that your situation relates to other people. So, for instance, every landlord you deal with is going to be different. Every client that I work with has a different budget and a different vision. And so, really, what this is about is dialing everything up and down so that it can balance out so that we can make a project really happen. Because if we're too out of whack in one way, or if too many things are dialed up too high, you're not going to be able to afford it probably. Or you might not be focusing on the right things, or you might not be saving money in areas that you can. And so, that's what we're going to talk about today. So if we're going to start talking about what these dials actually are, in my mind, they can be broken up into a list something like this, like the business model itself, as in what is your business actually going to be doing in terms of performance? The program elements, meaning what parts are actually going together to create the building for your business. Do you have enough spaces for different types of events or different types of users, whatever it might be? How does that all go together to support the business model itself? Number three might be the design stuff itself. Do you have expensive taste? How are you picking things? Are you actually pricing things early enough to really understand where the design decisions you make are putting your every single dollar, basically? And to be able to do that, we have to actually be pricing things pretty early. Another aspect would just be finances and funding. Are you trying to do something at an extremely low budget? If so, you need to be even more careful with all of these aspects to be able to make it a reality within a very limited budget. And in reality, everybody has a limited budget. And even people who feel like they have a lot of money, by the end of a project, I guarantee they will not feel that way because the money just goes. And so even people with large budgets, we really have to be careful throughout the whole parts of a project as we put it all together. Early phase planning and strategy would be related to how much are we doing early in the process of bringing a project to life? What can we do quickly without investing a lot of money, without having a huge team? How can we strategize our planning and early phases of bringing a project to life? Number six might be the real estate and building needs, and specifically how that relates to budgeting. And what I mean by that, and I'll show some very specific examples of this, is that the building itself, meaning what condition is the building that you're taking over if you're going to be renting one, or if you're going to be building one, how much site work is needed to be done, or other things like that, because these are huge amounts of money that are, multiple six-figure decisions, hundreds of thousands of dollars that will have a huge impact on your bottom line in the long run. And then number seven, the actual construction and startup investment. And from my point of view, this is your biggest investment to actually get open. And so we need to be really careful with it and being really aware of, how much is it going to really take to get started, to get you up and running? What can we do about that? How can we control that? So if we take these needs, these dials, and we put them into a rainbow of sorts, and we start actually looking at them in a different way, the thing about them is that none of this is black and white. None of it is actually a right or a wrong way to do it, because in fact, what they really end up doing is blending and overlapping with each other. As soon as one goes up, the other might go down. As soon as two go up, you might be pulling one way out of whack. It doesn't really matter, because the way that it actually happens is that these things are overlapping and they influence each other. So they really do have this more sort of translucent rather than black and white opaque relationship to each other, because this is how we experience a real project. If we're trying to save money somewhere, that could be in the budget itself for the building. It could be in the rent, for instance. If we need to get more money coming in, it could be more tenant improvement money, that dial going up. It could be the programming that we are trying to institute for the space, and maybe the building itself needs to be adjusted to support that with different rooms or whatever it is, or different space allocations. And so when we dial one up, like say more revenue, that affects other things, one of the other seven dials, if you will, to be able to support that and bring it all into balance. Just as a very specific example, let's take one building that's the same size and look at it in three different scenarios where we're adjusting different things up and down. In this example, I've got a 15,000 square foot building that I'm looking at as number one, new construction. Number two, a building that needs a decent amount of work to be able to take it over. And then number three, a building that doesn't need a ton of work and you can sort of take it and work on it in the way that you want to. You're not having to sort of bring it back to life before you put your stuff into it. If we look at the first example, we might be able to just take historic data and say, look, for the type of building, the type of project we're doing, maybe it's about $300 a square foot multiplied by the size of the project, which can give us a relatively straightforward estimate at the very least, where we can start talking about what the building might cost very quickly. And say you have some specialty furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, climbing, skating, racket sports, whatever it is, this sort of clump of cash can be put into a base number for a new construction project. And certainly there's going to be site work or whatever else is needed, but this gets us to a number that we can look at pretty quickly. And what we immediately see is that, it's not cheap, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's something we have to be aware of very early. In the second scenario, let's say that we're taking an existing building. We're not building up, but we're taking an existing building. So our dollar per square foot of work we have to do for our project is less. We're not having to build the roof. We're not necessarily having to do a bunch of, main stuff to just get the building out of the ground. But with that being said, the building, say, needs a lot of work in this scenario. It needs a lot of help with, maybe the air conditioning doesn't work, or it has, some structural issues that need to be repaired in the masonry or whatever. Maybe the elevator needs some attention and the roof, and, you're just removing a bunch of rooms. Like a lot of times you'll go into a building and there's just a bunch of stuff to remove, or other mechanical, electrical, and plumbing issues, like a bunch of, adding bathrooms that aren't necessarily in the right place, or whatever the case is. Let's just assume that this larger chunk of cash, in addition to the sort of base scope of the work you want to do, meaning whatever it is for your business, adds up to, say, instead of $80 a square foot, when you go all in, it's more like $120 a square foot. So this is really just showing that if a building needs a lot more work for you to take it over or to clean it up, the cost of getting in there is actually quite a bit more. And that's, again, fairly obvious, but it's important, I think, when you look at the numbers because they add up very quickly. And so in the third scenario, let's say that you're doing the same amount of work in the sense of the stuff you're putting in for your business, the equipment, the base build out of, whatever it is for your like entry and lockers or whatever it is. Maybe you have some work to do on air conditioning or whatever it is, but it's relatively minor and you're not doing a lot of work on the landlord's building, the landlord's asset. And what it ends up doing is it means that your base building investment is a lot closer to that $80 a square foot. Overall, it's just a matter of how much it is that you're having to invest to be able to take over the building. And if we look at this in terms of percentages, the more simple building, for instance, these zeros, what I'm saying is they might have almost nothing to do with what you're building. They have everything to do with the real estate you're looking at. So that dial, in this case, it needs more. And in this case, over here, the dial is turned down. And the result is saving a good amount of money. The more extreme case is certainly when you compare that to the new build, where you're saving, you're paying 75% less to do the build out on the same size facility. So it's not that these are hard estimates, but these are ballparks based on real life experience that I've been having visiting sites with clients fairly recently. And this is the way that we can do back of the envelope math to contextualize how much of a savings we can actually realize, or what the real cost of a building investment is going to be, depending on either how much work needs to go into a building or new construction or whatever it is. Because a lot of people start here. They want new construction. They want something that's, twice as big as this, whatever it is. But when we actually do the numbers, that's when we can very quickly start seeing, hey, actually, we need to either reset where we want to go, or consider other options or different sizes or whatever. And this is just a chart over 5 years of cumulative cash flow for the same size facility, but built at sort of different degrees of quality. So a luxury cost per square foot build out versus a lower or sort of DIY cost of build out, with a lot of assumptions being more or less in the same ballpark, meaning just we're assuming that just because you're spending more doesn't mean you can charge a ton more for your membership, maybe a little bit more. So again, these are the dials. If you want more cash flow, if you want to invest a lot and you're taking a big deficit to start, meaning you're spending a lot of money, so this is the debt, and you want this to go higher, say that return needs to be higher, you need to be able to adjust the business model dial so that you can actually drag that up. In other cases, though, what you can see is that, certainly if you're looking at a DIY option, say you build something super cheap or you don't have to invest a lot, your cash return actually still is pretty good and you're not taking on as much debt. So in this case, you're more sort of equal in terms of you're not having to invest a ton of money, which helps you get open sooner and helps cash coming in the door. You're not starting from such a debt deficit. And over here, these are just the 3 examples of what we looked at in the previous slides of the 3 different models and what those build outs have a return on. And what you can see is that if you don't adjust other dials, meaning how much it costs to use your facility or the way that you use your programming and, bring in more revenue or whatever it is, you can see that sometimes investing a lot more, like the, 4.75 million, doesn't necessarily give you a lot more of a return. And whether or not you're doing a nonprofit or a for-profit business, to be a sustainable business, it's important to know these numbers and be able to justify or at least have an argument and a story for why it is you're putting together a facility in the way that you are. Because this is what it's really about. It's about being able to focus your money on the things that you want to build to make your facility unique, the thing that is going to give you an identity, a unique feeling that is going to make people want to continue to come back and be the thing that's truly your vision. And again, whether or not it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, it's important to just know these numbers, because if we establish these types of filters and we sort of baseline these different dials so that we can move them up and down, it really helps us as we have conversations, both as we work to develop projects, but also with other stakeholders. Because what ends up happening is that if you have other people in your company or directors or other stakeholders, they are probably going to want different pieces of the pie. They're going to want more. And so to be able to actually look at it from a little bit more of an objective way, granted, we are speculating and we're making a lot of assumptions and estimates, but to be able to try to have baselines that we all can look at and agree on, that really helps us make decisions about what to include or what not to include, or how much to give to different programs, or how much we need to charge for memberships or day use or whatever it is, so that when we look at the numbers and we look at those 5-year trajectories, in different ways, we can say, okay, are we getting enough? Are we going to be resilient as we move the business forward in the future? And that's really what this is all about, is making something that's amazing, again, regardless of if it's for-profit or nonprofit, but something that also can support itself and, support you as the owner, or support the people who've invested in it, whether that's private individuals or a city, so that you can actually keep the thing up and running. Because there's not much point in doing all this if it's just going to run out of money and go away. That's a lot of work and a lot of heartbreak that's going to be around the corner. So that's why we're trying to avoid it up front and be able to focus your money and adjusting the dials in a way that makes it really accomplish the vision that you have. And so I hope that's helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.